The sun hung low over the endless stretch of the Sonoran desert, casting long shadows across the cracked earth, where cacti stood like silent sentinels under a sky painted in hues of fire and gold. A young traveler, Elise, stumbled through the dunes, her boots sinking into the sand, her lips parched and cracking under the relentless heat. She was a wanderer, driven by a restless spirit to seek the fabled Spirit Canyon, a place whispered about in her village, a sacred site where the Apache gods were said to walk among mortals. Her map, now tattered and useless, had led her astray, and her water skin was long empty. Exhaustion weighed her down, her vision blurring as she tripped over a rock and fell to her knees, dust rising around her like a shroud. She clutched the pendant around her neck, a gift from her grandmother, etched with symbols she didn't understand but held dear. As despair crept into her heart, the ground trembled beneath her, a low rumble that seemed to pulse with the desert's own heartbeat. She looked up, squinting against the glare, and saw a figure emerging from the haze, a towering man, his silhouette framed by the dying light. His presence was like a mountain given life, broad-shouldered and clad in leather adorned with beads and feathers that danced in the wind. His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto hers, and though fear gripped her, there was something ancient and steady in his gaze. "Don't be afraid," his voice boomed, deep as thunder yet soft as a whisper carried by the wind. "You are safe with me." Elise froze, her heart pounding, unsure if this was salvation or a new peril. The giant Apache knelt beside her, his movements slow and deliberate, as if not to startle a frightened deer. He offered her a gourd filled with cool water, and she drank greedily, the liquid soothing her burning throat. He introduced himself as Tarak, a guardian of the old ways, bound to the desert by a vow to protect those who wandered too far from the path. His voice carried stories of his people, the Apache, who had lived in harmony with this harsh land for centuries, their spirits intertwined with the rocks and rivers. Elise listened, her fear melting into curiosity, as Tarak spoke of the canyon she sought, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. He warned her of its dangerous spirits that tested the hearts of those who entered it, but promised to guide her if she trusted him. She hesitated, her hand tightening around her pendant, but the sincerity in his eyes, like the desert itself, was undeniable. She nodded, and Tarak rose, offering his hand, his massive palm enveloping hers as he pulled her to her feet with ease. The desert seemed to hum around them, as if acknowledging their pact, and Elise felt a spark of hope ignite within her. They began to walk, the giant Apache leading the way, his steps sure and unyielding, while Elise followed, her strength returning with each sip of water and each word of his ancient tales. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, and though the journey was daunting, she felt a strange peace, as if the desert itself had chosen to cradle her in its vast, unforgiving arms. Too, as twilight deepened, the desert transformed, its colors shifting from fiery reds to cool purples, the stars beginning to pierce the velvet sky like scattered diamonds. Elise walked beside Tarak, her small frame dwarfed by his towering presence, yet she felt an odd sense of equality in their shared silence. The air grew cooler, and the scent of sage and earth filled her lungs, grounding her in the strange new world. Tarak's strides were long but measured, as if he were pacing himself to match her weary steps, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs only he could read. He spoke again, his voice a steady rhythm against the quiet night, telling her of the Apache's sacred connection to the land, how every rock, every gust of wind, carried the voices of ancestors. Elise, raised on stories of far-off cities and fleeting dreams, found herself captivated by his words, each one painting a picture of a world alive with meaning. She shared her own story haltingly at her village, her grandmother's tales of Spirit Canyon, and the pendant she wore, which Tarak examined with a knowing nod, recognizing its symbols as Apache blessings for protection. The desert night was alive with sounds, now a coyote's howling in the distance, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the faint hum of something older, deeper, that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Tarak paused, pointing to a cluster of stars forming a pattern like an arrow, explaining it was a guide his people followed to sacred places. Elise gazed upward, feeling small yet connected to something vast, her fear of the unknown giving way to awe. Tarak sensed her shift and smiled, a rare expression that softened his stern features. revealing a warmth that made her trust him further. He told her they would rest soon, but first, they needed to cross a dry riverbed where spirits were said to linger, testing travelers' resolve. Elise's heart quickened, but Tarak's steady presence anchored her, his words a reminder that fear was a shadow that could be faced. As they approached the riverbed, the air grew heavy, and a faint mist rose from the ground, curling around their feet like ghostly fingers. Elise clutched her pendant, whispering a prayer her grandmother taught her, while Tarak stood tall, his hand resting on a knife at his belt, not out of fear but readiness. The mist parted, revealing a path lined with smooth stones that glowed faintly under the starlight, and Tarak gestured for her to follow. Each step felt like a test, the air thick with whispers she couldn't understand, but Tarak's calm voice cut through, urging her to focus on the path ahead. They crossed without incident, the mist dissipating as if satisfied, and Elise exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Tarak praised her courage, his words simple but heavy with meaning, and she felt a swell of pride she hadn't known she could feel. They found a small alcove in a rock formation to rest, and as Tarak built a fire, its glow illuminating his weathered face, Elise felt a bond forming, and not just with him, but with the desert itself, its mysteries unfolding under his guidance. 3. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the rocky walls of their makeshift camp, as Elise sat cross-legged, her hands warmed by the flames. Tarak, seated across from her, seemed to blend into the night, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight like twin stars. He shared more stories, each one a thread in the tapestry of Apache laureate tales of the creator, used, who shaped the world from chaos, and of Coyote, the trickster whose mischief taught lessons in humility. Elise listened, her mind painting vivid images of spirits dancing across the desert, their forms woven from starlight and sand. She asked questions, her voice growing bolder, and Tarak answered with patience, explaining how his people honored the land through ceremonies, songs, and offerings. He showed her a small pouch at his waist, filled with sage and cedar, which he burned to purify the air, its sweet smoke curling upward like a prayer. Elise, emboldened, shared more about her life via her restless spirit, her longing for purpose, and the pull she felt towards Spirit Canyon, as if it called her in dreams. Tarak listened intently, his silence encouraging her to speak truths she'd never voiced aloud. He told her the canyon was not just a place, but a mirror of the soul, revealing what one carried within: courage, fear, or doubt. Elise felt a chill, wondering what the canyon would show her, but Tarak's steady gaze reassured her, his words a reminder that she was not alone. As the night deepened, he taught her a simple Apache song, its melody haunting yet soothing, and she hummed along, her voice shaky but earnest. The desert seemed to listen, the wind carrying their song into the vastness, and Elise felt a connection to something greater, as if her voice joined the chorus of ancestors. Tarak spoke of the trials at rattlesnakes, sudden storms, and spirits that tested resolve but promised to teach her the signs to watch for, the ways to move with the desert rather than against it. He showed her how to read the tracks of animals, the shift of clouds, and the feel of the earth beneath her feet, lessons that felt like gifts. Elise's exhaustion faded, replaced by a quiet strength, her fear of the desert's dangers tempered by Tarak's knowledge. As the fire died to embers, Tarak stood, scanning the horizon, his silhouette a guardian against the night. He told her to sleep, promising to keep watch, and Elise lay down on a blanket he provided, the stars above her a map of possibilities. Her dreams were vivid, filled with images of soaring eagles and glowing canyons, and though she woke to the pre-dawn chill, she felt rested, as if the desert had cradled her in its embrace. Tarak was already awake, his eyes on the horizon, and as they prepared to move on, Elise felt a growing resolve as she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, with the giant Apache by her side. 4. Dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold, as Elise and Tarak continued their journey toward Spirit Canyon. The terrain grew rougher, the sand giving way to rocky outcrops and twisted mesquite trees that clawed at the sky. Elise's legs ached, but she pressed on, inspired by Tarak's tireless pace and the stories he shared as they walked. He spoke of the Apache's history of battles fought, lands lost, and the resilience that kept their spirit alive. His words were not bitter but proud, carrying the weight of a people who had endured. Elise, whose own ancestors had come from distant lands, felt a pang of guilt for her ignorance of this place and its people, but Tarak's kindness dispelled any shame. Encouraging her to learn rather than dwell, he pointed out plants with healing property as a prickly pear for burns, yucca for strength, and showed her how to move silently, her steps blending with the desert's rhythm. The air grew hotter, the sun climbing higher, and Elise's pendant felt heavy against her chest, its symbols seeming to pulse with a life of their own. Tarak noticed, explaining that such charms were often imbued with prayers, carrying the strength of those who made them. Elise thought of her grandmother, wondering if she'd known the pendant's true power, and felt a surge of gratitude. As they climbed a rocky ridge, Tarak stopped suddenly, his hand raised, his eyes narrowing at the horizon. A dust storm was brewing, its dark wall looming like a living beast, and Elise's heart raced as the wind began to howl. Tarak acted swiftly, pulling her behind a boulder and wrapping his cloak around them both, his body shielding her from the stinging sand. His voice, steady even in the chaos, told her to breathe slowly, to trust the desert's temper would pass. The storm roared around them, a deafening symphony of wind and grit, but within Tarak's shelter, Elise felt safe, his words a lifeline. When the storm subsided, they emerged, covered in dust but unharmed, and Tarak's laughter deep and rare echoed across the now still desert. He praised her for staying calm, and Elise, though shaken, felt the spark of pride. They continued, the landscape now altered by the storm, with new paths revealed among the shifted sands. Tarak pointed to a distant ridge, saying the canyon was near, but warned that the final approach was guarded by trials only the pure of heart could pass. Elise nodded, her resolve hardening, and as they walked, she felt the desert's pulse beneath her feet, as if it were guiding her as much as Tarak was. The desert seemed to grow wilder as they neared Spirit Canyon, the air thick with an electric hum that made Elise's skin prickle. Towering rock formations loomed like ancient guardians, their surfaces etched with petroglyphs that told stories of creation and sacrifice. Tarak's demeanor shifted, his eyes sharp and alert, as if sensing something Elise could not. He explained that the canyon's entrance was hidden, revealed only to those deemed worthy by the spirits, and that they must prove their respect for the land. Elise felt a mix of awe and trepidation, her hand brushing the pendant as if seeking its strength. Tarak led her to a narrow pass, its walls rising high, the air cool and heavy with the scent of ancient stone. He taught her an Apache prayer, its words unfamiliar but resonant, and she repeated them, her voice trembling but sincere. The pass opened into a clearing where a single juniper tree stood, its branches heavy with the frings of feathers, beads, and scraps of cloth tied by past pilgrims. Tarak instructed her to leave something of her own, a token of her intent, and Elise hesitated before untying a ribbon from her hair, its blue fabric bright against the tree's gnarled bark. As she tied it, a breeze stirred, carrying a whisper that seemed to approve, and Tarak nodded, his eyes warmed with approval. They moved deeper into the pass, the walls narrowing until they had to walk single file, Tarak's broad frame barely fitting. The air grew heavier, and Elise felt eyes upon her, though no one was there. Tarak warned her of the spirit's tests, illusions that played on fear and doubt, and told her to hold fast to her purpose. As if on cue, the walls seemed to shift, their shadows forming shapes that whispered her failures, her fears of being unworthy. Elise's breath caught, but Tarak's voice cut through, steady and sure, reminding her of her courage, of the pendant's power, of the trust they'd built. She focused on his words, stepping forward, and the shadows faded, the pass opening into a wider path. Tarak's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of pride, and Elise felt stronger, as if the desert had tested her and found her worthy. They camped that night under a ledge, the stars brighter than ever, and Tarak shared more stories of warriors who faced the canyon's trials, of healers who drew power from its depths. Elise fell asleep to the sound of his voice, dreaming of a canyon aglow with light, its walls singing with the voices of those who came before. 6. Morning brought a stillness that felt sacred, The desert bathed in a golden haze as Elise and Tarak approached the final stretch to Spirit Canyon. The landscape was otherworldly now, with spires of red rock piercing the sky and a faint glow emanating from the ground, as if the earth itself were alive. Tarak's steps were reverent, his voice low as he spoke of the canyon's power, a place where the physical and spiritual worlds met, where one could glimpse their true self. Elise felt her heart race, not with fear but anticipation, her pendant warm against her skin. They reached a stone archway, its surface carved with symbols that matched those on her pendant, and Tarak explained it was the gateway, guarded by a spirit known as the Watcher. He instructed her to approach alone, to speak her truth, and though her legs trembled, she stepped forward. Tarak's presence, a silent strength behind her. Under the arch, the air shimmered, and a figure appeared, not human, but a form of light and shadow, its eyes piercing. Elise spoke, her voice steady despite her racing heart, telling of her journey, her longing for purpose, her respect for the land. The Watcher listened, its form shifting, and then it vanished, the archway glowing as if granting passage. Tarak joined her, his face proud, and they stepped through together, entering a vast canyon where the walls soared, painted with colors that seemed to pulse with life. The air was alive with whispers, not threatening but welcoming, and Elise felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty and power of the place. Tarak guided her to a pool at the canyon's heart, its waters clear and reflective, and told her to look within. She knelt, gazing into the pool, and saw not just her reflection but images of her life via her grandmother, her doubts, her hope as woven into a tapestry of light. The canyon seemed to speak, its voice a chorus of ancestors, telling her she was enough, that her journey was her strength. Tarak stood silently, letting her absorb the moment, and when she rose, her eyes were clear, her heart full. They sat by the pool, sharing a quiet meal of dried fruit and bread, and Tarak spoke of the Apache's belief and balance, how the canyon gave clarity but demanded respect. Elise felt changed, as if the canyon had reshaped her, and she thanked Tarak, her words heartfelt. As night fell, the canyon glowed under the stars, and Elise knew she carried its light within her. 7. Leaving Spirit Canyon felt like waking from a dream, the desert's colors softer, its air gentler, as if it too had been touched by their journey. Elise walked beside Tarak, her steps lighter, her heart unburdened by the doubts that had once weighed her down. The pendant around her neck seemed to hum, its symbols now a part of her, a reminder of the canyon's gift. Tarak spoke less now, his silence a sign of trust, letting Elise lead at times, her newfound confidence guiding their path. They followed the winding trail back toward the desert's edge, where the world of villages and roads awaited. Tarak shared final lessons of how to honor the land in her daily life, how to carry the canyon's wisdom in her heart. He taught her a farewell song, its melody a promise to return, and Elise sang with him, her voice strong and clear. The desert seemed to listen, its winds carrying their song, and Elise felt a connection to the land she'd never known before. As they neared a familiar ridge, Tarak stopped, his eyes scanning the horizon, and told her this was where their paths would part. Elise's heart sank, but she understood that the canyon had been her destination, but the journey with Tarak had been her true transformation. He gave her a small pouch of sage, a token to carry with her, and told her she was now a friend of the Apache, welcome to return when the desert called. Elise thanked him, her words inadequate for the gratitude she felt, and Tarak's smile was a gift, his eyes reflecting the desert's timeless wisdom. He turned, his figure blending into the landscape, and Elise watched until he was gone, a part of the desert once more. She stood alone, yet not lonely, the pendant warm against her chest, the sage pouch a weight of promise in her hand. The village lay ahead, its lights faint on the horizon, and Elise walked toward it, her steps sure, her heart full of the canyon's light and Tarak's words. Don't be afraid, you are safe with me. 8. The village came into view as dusk settled, its stubby walls glowing under the last rays of sunlight, a stark contrast to the wild vastness of the desert Elise had crossed. She felt different, as if the canyon had carved a new path within her, one of purpose and clarity. The pendant, now a symbol of her journey, rested lightly against her chest, and the sage pouch in her pocket was a reminder of Tarak's teachings. As she entered the village, faces turned, curious and familiar, and she saw her grandmother waiting at the edge of the square, her eyes bright with knowing. Elise ran to her, embracing her tightly, and whispered of the canyon, of Tarak, of the spirits that had tested and blessed her. Her grandmother listened, her wrinkled hands tracing the pendant symbols, and nodded, as if she'd always known Elise would find her way. The village buzzed with questions, but Elise shared only pieces of her story, the rest too sacred for casual words. She sat with her grandmother that night, by a fire much like the one she'd shared with Tarak, and recounted the lessons of the desert, its harshness, its beauty, its wisdom. Her grandmother added her own stories, of Apache kin who had once visited their village, of bonds forged across cultures. Elise realized her journey had not just been her own, but a bridge between worlds, a way to honor both her roots and the land she'd come to love. Days passed, and she began teaching the village children about the desert, its plants, its songs, its respect, of passing on Tarak's gifts. She wore the pendant always, a beacon of her transformation, and kept the sage pouch close, burning its leaves in quiet moments to honor the spirits. The desert called to her still, its voice in the wind, and she knew she would return one day, to walk its paths again, perhaps to find Tarak or another guardian. For now, she lived with purpose, her heart a canyon of light, her spirit as vast as the desert itself. The words "Don't be afraid, you are safe with me" echoed in her soul, a promise not just from Tarak, but from the land, the spirits, and the strength she'd found within.